Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining this showcase session. I'm really excited to be here today, and I hear a bit of an echo, so I don't know if that's something to do with my with the recording. So we'll just keep on talking, even though I hear myself with a slight delay. Apologies for this. So my name is Juan. I'm a Director of Public Policy at Facebook, and I'm delighted to have two very distinguished guests here. For this showcase session, it's David Hutton from the Telecom Infra project, and it's Juan Carlos Garcia from Telefonica.
Good morning.
Morning.
And the topic of this showcase session is building the future European 5G networks with OpenRAN. And I think this discussion is very timely, because only a month ago there was this announcement by four major operators in Europe announcing the fact that they were going to put more efforts in building the 5G networks on OpenRAN standards. And they signed a memorandum of understanding together, which we will hopefully hear from Juan Carlos from, and also from David, because TIP plays a very important role in this space. About myself, I work at Facebook as a policy director. I lead Facebook's connectivity efforts in the EMEA space, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is very exciting. I joined Facebook 3 years ago. Before that, I had a long career into regulation, and also before the regulatory part of my career, I worked in the telecom industry and the aviation industry. I've got a background in econometrics, and it's really exciting to be working in this space in Facebook, because as many of you know, we are very active in the field of connectivity, even though we of course have a lot of services that we want to provide. We work very closely together with a lot of telco operators and partners globally, whether it's via the Telecom Infra project, but also via very many other constellations, because we believe that there's a huge connectivity agenda that we need to achieve. It's still a big challenge to connect the rest of the world, and to make the internet more connected, to build bridges, and also to bridge the digital divide and make the internet more affordable. And I think we need all our efforts, which we also hear these days on conferences like this, to bundle together to make this happen. And once again, that about my background. Let me move to the two speakers of today. We have David Hutton to start with. David is working within the Telecom Infra project as the chief engineer, and David has more than 25 years, if I'm right, experience in telecommunications, and he has an extensive knowledge of existing and future mobile network technologies. Recently, David worked on topics such as 5G, network function virtualization, operated cloud, and edge computing. David, as the chief engineer of the Telecom Infra project, is responsible for the technical committee and project groups, as well as providing the technical strategy for the organization. David also leads the TIP's engagement on industry relations and partnerships. Prior to joining TIP, David held senior roles within GSMA, Vodafone, Nortel Networks, and Symbian on areas of technical strategy, product planning, and standardization of mobile technologies. Then we have Juan Carlos Garcia, who is the Senior Vice President of Technology Innovation and Ecosystem at Telefonica Global CTIO unit. Juan Carlos leads technical projects like edge computing, private networks, or network slicing. He also leads the technical innovation plan and oversees all Telefonica's participation in standardization bodies and industry fora, such as ORAN, ETSI, 3GPP, and many others. The discussion of today, as I said, is about OpenRAN and 5G. Let me start by asking David from the Telecom Infra project, if you could clarify a little bit what the Telecom Infra project is, first of all, what the members are, and what the Telecom Infra Infra project goals are in the 5G space and how OpenRAN fits into this agenda. David, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think to start off with, in terms of 5G, I think it goes to show, connectivity is extremely important. It adds to the GDP of countries and transforms economies as well. And we've seen that. You made a great point before about, half the world are connected. And that's an amazing achievement, in terms of 25, 30 years of, I would say, mobile technology. To achieve that is great. We need to look after the rest now, and we also need to make sure that we improve connectivity in the markets where it already is. I mean, I'm in the UK, but I'm in a region where my 4G connectivity isn't particularly great, so we need to improve on how we deploy networks, especially in how we're working today. Everybody's probably in their home office. If you're in your work office, then you're very, very lucky. And 5G, I think, can play a really important role in terms of adding to that level of connectivity that we have and require. And it's not just us as consumers, but it's also industries that are looking at connectivity as a basis for their work as well. And I want to make a point of clarification that for 5G, I don't mean just the radio aspect. I think that within the 5G era, networks are transforming as a whole. And that's the core network, whether it's a new 5G core based on service-based architecture. The transport network needs to be upgraded to handle that new level of capacity. There are other access technologies like Wi-Fi 6, which will play an important role alongside 5G as well. And if you take all those together, there is flexibility in how you can deploy those networks to support industries, enterprises, private networks, etc. But rolling out that level of 5G connectivity requires a lot of investments, but that's not necessarily proportional to the revenues that the operators may get in for that level of investment. So there are two things that can be done, and both should be done. One is looking at new revenue streams, and the other is looking at new ways of building network infrastructure. And within TIP is a non-profit membership organization that believes that a disaggregated and open solution-based infrastructure based on open standards provides a better basis for building, testing, and deploying that network infrastructure to aid with improving the supply chain, spur new innovation, and improve the network economics of deploying connectivity as a whole. So that's TIP, and my role there is to help to guide the technical committee in our overall technical strategy that oversees the relevant project groups that are delivering these types of products and solutions.
Thanks, David. That's a great intro. Moving to Juan Carlos. I mentioned already the Memorandum of Understanding signed last month between Telefonica and 3 other operators in Europe. Maybe Juan Carlos, you can explain a little bit more about Telefonica's position regarding 5G, and also how this commitment to OpenRAN fits into this agenda.
Well, thank you, Johan. So it is interesting on our view to see how 5G is not only bringing new capabilities, and new opportunities, but also accelerating the transformation of the telco network architectures and operation models. So 5G is bringing on one side important promises, so a huge bandwidth, very low latency, ultra reliability, so a lot of features, but also, and this is represented, of course, a big business opportunity, but it's also demanding a strong transformation of our networks to make them more flexible and efficient. And the main mechanisms applied to achieve such a goal are basically 2. One is the cloudification, so moving the network systems to software-based cloud-native functions or solutions, and benefit from the scale and well-proven tools and practices of IT and cloud. Okay, this way we will be able to save hardware resources by selling these resources by different network functions. The second point or lever of bringing this efficiency and flexibility is disaggregation. opening the hardware and software of the network systems, up to now monolithic systems, to make them more modular and increase the options for innovation and efficiency. Being able to incorporate smaller providers specialize in niche domains in the supply chain, and being able to adapt better equipment features to the demand of the specific services, segments, and customers. Okay, this is helping us in bringing this efficiency and flexibility that I mentioned that will be required in 5G to deliver to the promises. And this is the reason why we are pushing, these open and disaggregated architectures. It is not only OpenRAN, it's also the Open Transport, Open Core, and other initiatives in TIP.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And before I move on, I just wanted to tell all the participants that if you have any questions along this session, feel free to ask them in the chat box, and then I will try to take them on board as much as possible. Getting back to David, you just heard Juan Carlos from Telefonica, and you of course work together with all the other operators via TIP and many other partners. What's your vision about how the open technologies will impact the network supply chain in the coming years? And could there be benefits for Europe in particular in this space?
I think so, and I don't think it's just for 5G. I think that we're looking at doing that for all technologies that TIP works on. I think Juan Carlos mentioned that we work in areas of access, of backhaul and transport and core as well, and multiple different access technologies, and looking at that disaggregation across all of those. And what I mean by disaggregation is separating out the hardware and the software components, and allowing that to be a multi-vendor approach. And by doing that, you can actually start to base hardware on commercial off-the-shelf components, which should reduce the cost. And by also shifting complexity in the software layer, the software lifecycle is a lot quicker. And it means that we're opening up the ecosystem to other innovators that now can start to play in the telecommunications sector, because they don't have to build a fully integrated solution with hardware as well. They can just be a pure software vendor and have a real impact with new innovation of deploying technologies within telecommunications as a whole. I think that for Europe, this will have a huge level of benefit as well. The initial focus that I think that we see with 5G has been a lot on outdoor back row, and that's fine. That satisfies the initial capacity play for enhanced mobile broadband. A lot of those early deployments are focused on binding into a 4G core network for a non-standalone option. I think that will transform soon to binding into a new 5G core network, and TIP is also providing solutions for that. That will lead to real revolutionary changes in terms of embracing full cloud native architecture, and allowing for flexibility to support enterprise and private networks in very different ways in smart city deployments, Industry 4.0, because if you have a common cloud native infrastructure, you can then start to piece together the software components from, maybe I want to put some radio here, maybe I want to have some packet core aspects included in that solution, and maybe I want to include some enterprise applications on there as well, and I can package that on a single cloud native platform and decide where I want to place that. That could be on-premise, that could be at an aggregation point, or it could be, a mixture of the two. So the level of flexibility that we have, that operators can now choose in terms of selecting the best of breed in terms of vendors is a huge benefit that will start to benefit downstream to the actual consumers, which are you and I, but also the industry sectors. And I think that's a huge opportunity for Europe's economy.
Thanks, David. And if you were to describe the phase where we are right now, I can see this whole vibrant economy coming out of these dynamics. Where would you describe we are right now in this whole process?
Well, I think within TIP, we're doing a lot of development on that. We base a lot of our work on standards. We are not a standards organization. So we base a lot of our work on the 3GPP releases and what they develop, and also in regards to OpenRAN, a lot of the new architectures and interfaces that the ORAN Alliance are producing as well. What we do is that we take that into our organization and we productize it. And we have a bit of a reset with operator requirements coming in, which we aggregate together as a community to work out, at this point in time, what does the market really need? I think that, having worked in standards for a long time, and I know that some other people have done as well, we know that there's a lot of technology that goes into standards that maybe isn't of priority to the market when, we put out the initial deployments. So we can profile that down from an operator's priority, and we take into account the vendors' support for particular features as well. And we put that together and we start to develop an industry roadmap of what we can develop and deploy for open optical packet transport and other things, and identify different releases of when different features will become available. With 5G NR, I think that we're well on our way. I think that there are definitions in terms of product requirements documentation, and there are trials ongoing now as well. And I think it's important that we continue on the stream to hit that level of commercial reality that we're starting to achieve with TIP incubated solutions.
Thanks, David. Speaking about the commercial reality, Juan Carlos, if you look at Telefónica's roadmap and hearing the timelines and the explanation by David within TIP, how does this translate into the implementation within Telefónica? That's one question. What is the commercial deployment you anticipate? And also the other question would be, what will European consumers see in terms of product changes, user experience, and how does this fit into the broader European policy agenda? Juan Carlos.
Yeah, well, we see already a good number of network elements that are already there, no? That we are getting to see in the market and that you can procure today, no? In fact, we are already incorporated a good number of elements from the transport networks into our production environment. And to name a few, we can talk about the distributed cell-site gateways, the partially disaggregated optical transport elements, the OpenBNG, and other open routers, no, that are today a reality in the networks. And that the maturity from our standards and suppliers is good enough. No? There are other areas currently very relevant, like OpenRAN, where probably operators, including Telefonica, have trialed extensively already in the field. So we have shown the technical feasibility of such solutions, I think, in a number of experiences. And I think we are getting to a point in which we will be able to procure them at scale. And this is something that we expect to see in the next months and years, to the point that it will become, probably in a few years, the predominant way of deploying radio access networks, very likely. There is, of course, on our view, still some innovation required in the area of OpenRAN, especially to automate all the processes of planning, design, deployment, operation, and maintenance. So the assurance of this network, the orchestration of services end-to-end in an automatic way, and the introduction of artificial intelligence, machine learning, to be able to learn about the behavior of this new open environment, identify anomalies, and apply automatically solutions. So there are plenty of work still to be done in these open architectures, and we will see them, very soon, getting into production also in the access networks, as I said. an open solution is true that is probably more complex, no? As it's a multi-vendor environment in which there will be a lot of interfaces to interoperate among different modules from different suppliers. This will bring a management complexity and will require high levels of automation. But I think the industry is overall working quite a lot on that and is moving in the right directions. We will need initiatives like MUST, standardizing the OpenSDN use cases, or open automation in TIP as well, to contribute with this innovation on the automation side as well.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. One more for you, Juan Carlos, focusing a little bit more on the Memorandum of Understanding together with the 3 other operators. What will be the benefit of specifically this MOU doing this together with the operators, and what does it mean for those operators who are not part of that MOU?
Okay. Well, first remark that we are now 5, so there is another operator joining in. And well, the main goal is working together to consolidate the OpenRAN as the technology of choice for RAN in the future. As we all strongly believe, it will help in efficiency and in innovation and differentiation opportunities. For achieving this goal, we are in this under this agreement supporting the ORAN specification and standards. We are supporting in covering gaps in management, orchestration, and operation in the different bodies, encourage a competitive ecosystem to strengthen the European RAN industry, promoting public policies, and also prioritizing the use of OpenRAN technology in our deployments. In general, the objective is to set a trust and confidence environment, both for the demand and the supply sides, that can promote the development of OpenRAN in Europe. And of course, what we understand is that this will be to the benefit not just of the operators signing the agreement, but also to the rest of operators and overall to the telecom industry.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. Moving back to David and TIP. And I think that TIP has emerged as the leading community in the open network space over the last couple of years. So congratulations with that achievement, if I were to say it. There are also TIP community labs across Europe. Can you explain a little bit more in detail for the participants how they work and what they try to achieve?
Yeah, so globally, we actually have 14 community labs. It could actually be up to 15 now, I think. And 5 of them are based in Europe. And, you know, this is something very different to other organizations. You know, it may be helpful if I could just pull up a slide to show the process and then talk about how community labs feed into that aspect. I think that may be helpful to explain. So here you see a slide that I think I talked a little bit about the beginning of our process here. So once standards are developed on the left-hand side, you know, we'll take in the market opportunities and the use cases that come from the operators. We'll align that with what the vendors can actually support to build technical roadmaps, and that includes product requirements, so that vendors can actually build towards that. And this is really, really important. You know, for tier 1 operators to set out for us to aggregate their priorities for feature level support is really important for the new vendors who are trying to break through. They don't necessarily get that visibility because they're not necessarily on the procurement list of the big operators. So this helps them to set out what their roadmaps are, and that's a great thing as well. Because they have limited R&D, and we want to harmonize their R&D activities rather than fragment it by having to go and do this on a bilateral basis. This is the beauty of doing it within a community. So vendors will start to build towards that. The TIP community will start to develop common test plans, and that's important as well. Anybody who's been involved in test and validation will know that just generating a test plan and test cases takes a lot of resource and effort. And test and validation for us is extremely important because that takes us on the journey away from just a paper exercise to getting real products into lab environments and making sure that they reach a level of product level maturity. And the process here is not just a one-stop process. We have various different levels of products being self-certified against a common test plan, which is the early stage maturity, to getting that product into a community lab and doing product level testing, and getting that level of maturity to then start to do integration testing, end-to-end testing, through to field trials as well. And for each of those different stages, the product becomes more mature, more commercially viable, and more ready to actually be deployed. So we badge at each of those different stages to indicate on our tip exchange, our open marketplace that you can see on our website, the products that are out there and the level of maturity that they are related to the test plans that we've developed and the requirements that the operators have set. And that is really, really important to start to stimulate the ecosystem to achieve that level of scale. The idea being is that if you can do that as a community, you shorten the time from when a standard is complete to when products are commercially ready in a disaggregated format. And that's what we're trying to do. The other aspect of doing this within a community lab environment and within TIP is at each of those different levels of testing, feedback comes back into the community in terms of lessons learned, deployment and operational guidelines, so that we're accelerating that level of commercial readiness as well. And that's important for us. And the community labs play a huge part of that, to the point where we're really proud to have 14, 15 community labs around the world.
Thanks, David. I see a couple of questions coming in, so I'm moving to my next question and then take up some questions from the floor to get those also answered by you guys. One more before we move there. Sometimes you hear from stakeholders concerns about the security aspects coming with OpenRAN technologies. And another thing you hear from some stakeholders is about sustainability and power usage of OpenRAN technologies being used. Could you both, and maybe Juan Carlos, you want to go first, comment on those claims?
Well, 5G and OpenRAN as well are enabling new opportunities and control points that enable suppliers, manufacturers, carriers, operators to assess and manage the security risks. More concretely, OpenRAN is providing a framework for the communication network ecosystem to align on a shared understanding of security requirements and also to tailor these requirements in a more granular level that has been possible up to now. Okay, so we are getting to control the security on smaller modules and not just on bigger systems. The open interfaces defined by ORAN are defined transparently and based on technical standards. They are built on methods that are well proven, that are used to protect the cloud and also are based on proven hardware virtualization technology. And this is bringing a good basis for security as well to this 5G and open implementation. And if we combine this with the mobile edge computing, that is facilitating also capabilities that allows us to isolate network capacity for high critical use cases and separate it from the general internet traffic. I think this is helping much on the security improvement. So we have a number of tools, these open interfaces with the support of virtualized network functions that are enabling additional security controls. And this is thanks to the micro-segmentation or the separation in microservices and also the containerization. And the combination of these two things offer opportunities for a strong authentication and control of the access to the different elements of the network. And they are today, the common practices also in enterprise security management. So we are just, taking the chance of applying all the security mechanisms that are already defined for IT and cloud, also to this network telco environment. And we think that this will help in further improve this security. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd make a point there as well. I think we all acknowledge that security is of prime importance to the industry. I think the view of, in the old days of having a trusted domain, which never truly existed, let's be honest, that's gone, and that's a good thing, because I think that there's more focus on security being adopted in networks. I disagree with the view that disaggregated approach exposes more. I think if that was the case, then current networks would just be a single network in a box solution with no interfaces exposed, and that's not the way that we work today. I also think that by working in an open and disaggregated approach, you're exposing more about how things have been implemented and are interoperable and interwork, and that actually helps to shine a light on any issues. And by doing that as well, it means that components can be interchangeable, so that if there is a security issue being exposed by a particular, let's say, a vendor solution, a software solution, you should be able to easily replace that, and you probably do that remotely with a software version of with an upgrade or actually replacing it. But I'd also say that security frameworks and improvements, they have to apply to all types of RAN implementations, not just OpenRAN, but I think for fully integrated RAN as well. And I think that a lot of vendors who maybe are not embracing OpenRAN are still starting to embrace virtualization and cloud native solutions. So they will still, have the same type of cybersecurity threat vectors that come in with disaggregated solutions that we're proposing as well. So we fully aggregate, or we fully want security frameworks to exist and be applied and solve for everything. I would say that with TIP, we have a very diverse community, including a lot of security experts and a lot of and hyperscalers as well, who have seen these challenges when they've already transformed to their data centers. And we can learn a lot from that and start to adapt those security solutions into the telco world as we're moving more towards IT, as Juan Carlos said. And the last thing, I think, because when we mention security, it's such a broad topic. There are so many different angles that we can come from, based on the horizontal view of traditional firewalls and gateways to, now I've got a vertical stack that I need to look out at, how do I apply it to a virtualized or cloud native architecture? But also when we talk about continuous integration and continuous deployment, applying continuous security to that as well, with DevSecOps. So looking after making sure that everything is secure from the point where you write the software, you test the software, you deliver the software, you store your software in a data repository, and then you start to deploy it. That also needs to be secured. So I think that TIP has relevant work going on in each of these areas to make sure that open disaggregated solutions are secure.
Thanks, David. And very briefly, maybe on the energy consumption part.
Probably we may say a couple of things there. No, I think this has been a question mark to OpenRAN technologies from the very beginning. Okay, and this has been a statement that has taken us some time to try to answer. No? We have seen with the trials that this is not reality the case. The difference is not so big, especially on looking at the way the hardware is evolving and also the kind of solutions that can be used on OpenRAN. But there are also other aspects here, that is the architecture that OpenRAN is bringing, the opportunity of setting hardware from different base stations on certain functions for the baseband processing. It is helping additional savings. and even the sharing that is coming from a cloud architecture of the OpenRAN. No? So I think all in all, this combination of the improvement on the processors that are used in the OpenRAN solutions, and the architecture itself, is, I think, bringing a level of efficiency on OpenRAN solution similar or even better than in traditional ones. No? We are in general aiming at reaching to a point of maturity in OpenRAN that is really equal or better than in terms of efficiency to the traditional solutions, and we are quite confident that we will get there.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's high on the agenda of all operators. I think they're driving, the vendor community hard to make sure that there are requirements for efficiency targets and OPEX reduction for especially power in there as well. I think if you start to look at the OpenRAN architecture, and you're actually on each cell site, you're pulling back a lot of the technology and making the cell site as hardware based and antenna based as possible. So you're a lot of the compute aspects in aggregation points. So inherently, you're reducing power consumption at each cell site. So you could argue the fact that that architecture itself provides power saving benefits. I think that once we start seeing new components and next generation hardware components, next generation silicon that's being optimized for this coming on board, then that will include that would be more energy efficient as well. But in terms of additional aspects, I think it's not just power consumption. I also look at this in terms of supporting alternative energy sources. And if you can run base stations based on solar powered or wind, I think if you look at some deployments in rural Africa, but also in Scandinavia, I think a lot of the Scandinavian operators are going for 100% renewable energy, and that's great. Other aspects I think would be that the architecture allows for artificial intelligence and machine learning to be applied to help with things like self-organizing networks, looking at power saving by being more load adaptive. So when capacity isn't high demand, you lower that level of capacity as well, and you can turn the power down, which also the bandwidth on that interface on your front haul is not being used as much because you're not transmitting traffic, so power consumption on your transport goes down. I think there's many aspects to this that actually point to the fact that a disaggregated solution for OpenRAN could actually be a lot more energy efficient than a traditional integrated solution.
Thank you, David. I'm quickly moving to the questions because we have some minutes left, and I think we need to tackle those. Let me first go to the inevitable Brexit question. So that's back to you, David. What are your thoughts? This is a question from Suzanne Jopling. What are your thoughts following Brexit and the UK moving towards subsidies and away from state aid and therefore funding better connectivity? And do you think that the impact of the pandemic and the inability for many rural areas, probably many homes in general, struggling to connect to homeschooling, being able to work from home will affect the view of the government giving subsidies to telecoms companies and investing in technology? So it's a very broad question, steering a little bit away from OpenRAN, but maybe a very brief answer, if possible.
So somebody heard my British accent and had to bring Brexit in, so thank you very much for that. Look, as an engineer, I'm not going to comment on the subsidy and away from state aid aspect, but I do think that there is a role for policymakers to play, to work with the private companies like the mobile operators in order to help to accelerate, and get policies in place to accelerate the deployment of solutions to improve connectivity. I think that every single country has many different initiatives based on that. I think it's a case of working together to find out the best solution between the private sector and the public sector to improve that. It's a fine balance. We have a policy committee that does discuss things like that. There's also the OpenRAN policy committee that's in many discussions with policymakers and governments around this as well. So I think in terms of the second part, I think that the impact of the pandemic has also shown that there is the improved connectivity, even in what people would consider to be developed markets. So I think it's high on the agenda globally, not just in the UK.
Thanks, David. I was scrolling through the questions. I think some of them we tackled partially, at least, already by the conversation we had before. One more, I think this is more for you, Juan Carlos. What would be the best way for smaller innovative vendors to approach the big telecom operators? And given that you are a big telecom operator, I think it's a good one for you. A lot of companies are trying to reach out the same few major EU players, and how do big players qualify new solutions? It's a question from Rose Faria.
Okay, well, I think we are operators offering opportunity for these innovative suppliers to come into play, and give contributions, and we do this in different ways. Telefonica, as well as other operators like Vodafone, have launched RFIs for different components of the OpenRAN solution. We have done this several times in the past, and probably we will do again in the future. And the intention of this is to identify probably a good combination of components to create an OpenRAN system. And I think this is something that will keep on happening. We have also a way to bring the opportunity for these small companies to innovate and to collaborate and contribute to open solutions. That is this ecosystem that we are creating, like TIP, like ORAN, and many others, where they have the chance to join and come together with other providers to bring and give life to complete solutions. Okay, not just products, because in some cases also complete end-to-end solutions. And I think this is something that we are promoting quite a lot actively. And I think we can see the evidence with the amount of small companies that we have in TIP. I don't know, David, how many we have, but I mean, it's hundreds of them. And again, I will encourage them to keep on joining these kind of ecosystems, to keep on partnering with other players to try to bring these open solutions to life. And they will have opportunities. So this is the intention of what we are doing. And this is the intention of all the initiatives, even the one that we have recently launched with the telecom operators. What we can provide them, and I think this is very important for the supply side, is to give them clear requirements and aligned requirements from the telecom industry, so that they can focus their efforts on the features and characteristics that really matters to the potential user at the end, that will be the telecom operators. And that is where we also want to give a contribution to them, in the sense of having an aligned vision of the industry. Okay, that is something that I think the small providers cannot do on their own. Okay, they don't have the muscle and the resources to be able to talk to many operators, and also to get as a conclusion what is the overall requirements in the markets. And I think this is something that we need to provide them.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And I think we're in the last minute, but maybe very briefly, a last question to both of you, if you can give me a very brief answer. Is there a key message you want to pass on to policymakers in the OpenRAN field? David, you want to go first?
I think, I think policymakers need to be involved in looking at deploying technologies in the future, whether that be 5G or whether that be looking at any type of infrastructure. I think it's important to do that. I think that they need to work very closely with the operator community who actually have to go through and deploy these networks and understand the pain points that they have, and then understand how that filters down throughout the whole of the ecosystem. If we're talking about trying to improve the supply chain and the vendor ecosystem, I think, when I first started 25, 30 years ago without any grey hair, I think there were, let's say 15 large network equipment manufacturers. You had Nortel, you had Alcatel as a separate company, Lucent, Nokia and Siemens were two separate companies, and Marconi in the UK and a number of others. And that, I think, was something that was quite healthy. Through different reasons, that has shrunk. And now I think that policymakers are trying to, in each country, kickstart the local supply chain and try and get local manufacturers up and running as well. So I think it's a case of trying to stimulate that ecosystem and to work together to build that up, but putting together the right policy framework and the environment to allow that to happen organically. That's my perspective. Thank you.
That's a very clear message, David. Juan Carlos?
No, I agree with David. I think public administrations are conscious of the relevance of the technologies like 5G or fiber to the home or the transport networks for the society and the economy, and I think it's very relevant that these administrations are promoting the development of this kind of technologies, especially solutions that are efficient and are able to foster innovation, and bring opportunities to increase innovation. And this is an important engine will be for the development of the regions, and this applies to developed and developing countries, not just developed ones. So I think that public administration should be pushing quite a lot to create these spaces, to open the opportunities for technologies and solutions like the ones open and disaggregated architecture bring, because of the impact this may have again on the productivity, on the efficiency, and on the innovation in the regions. We have seen Europe especially conscious about that and pushing quite a lot. That is also one of the reasons we have been encouraged to run this MOU with other European operators and to push for these technologies in the region.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. And with that, I'm close to wrapping up. First of all, let me thank you both for this excellent outline of OpenRAN technologies and the exciting times we have ahead of us. I really hope to continue the conversation and maybe next year in person to hear more about the developments in this space. I think it was very insightful. Once again, thank you very much for this conversation, and for all participants, thank you for attending. There was fierce competition from other showcase sessions, but thank you for attending this one, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.